all the founders agreed that gun rights were crucial. James Madison said, if all these checks and balances I have written into this Constitution fail, you will still have a militia of millions that would overthrow any tyrant. So the Second Amendment was
Madison said that?
He said that.
That we'd still have a militia of millions to overthrow any tyrant.
And so that the Second Amendment is the break glass in case of tyranny hanging on the wall in the founding of the United States.
Welcome to Socrates in the studio. This is the studio. Today, we have kind of an interesting Socrates in the studio session because it's with someone with whom I've had many conversations, but never in a Socrates format. That person is this man, John Zmirak. John Zmirak, welcome to Socrates in the studio.
Thank you, Eric. I really appreciate it. And I like the fact that it's being videotaped. It's not live, so you can...
It's not live.
You can edit things out. I don't need to wear that shock...
Curse like Red Fox.
I don't have to wear that shock collar that...
Right.
Yeah.
We've known each other for since college, and I've interviewed you many, many times. But this is different. This is Socrates in the City. It's a different brand. It's a different thing. And you have come out. You do a lot of writing, but today you come here as the author of what I know to be an important book on a very important subject. In the interest of full disclosure, I wrote the foreword to the book because it seems to me such an important subject. So first of all, congratulations on this important book.
Thank you, Eric.
It is titled No Second Amendment, No First. So let's start with the nutshell version of the subject of the book before I start saying what it is. Tell me in your own words, what is the thesis of the book?
The thesis of the book is that religious liberty and gun rights in America are not just two accidental byproducts of our history. They're not quirks of the founding or stuff that happens to be in the Constitution. They both flow out of the same worldview, the same view of the human person as the image and likeness of God with an inalienable dignity, inalienable rights, an eternal destiny, and profound responsibilities before God and to our neighbor.
How did you come to write this book? And again, I mentioned the title, No Second Amendment, No First. That's not necessarily something that's clear to people, which is why I am so happy you wrote the book and you give the intellectual background. But how did you come, or let's put it another way, you have written and thought about these things a lot over a long time, but to write a significant, to some extent, scholarly treatment of the subject, because people talk about these things a lot, but what led you to say this needed to be done?
Watching what happened during the COVID panic, watching people throw away their constitutional rights and their human dignity with both hands in a desperate quest to feel safe, watching pastors shut down their churches, bishops shut down their cathedrals, the Pope turn his moral theology over to the World Health Organization, watching even President Trump be at first beguiled by Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx, watching YouTube say that it would censor doctors and researchers from speaking what they believed about the experimental gene therapy they called a vaccine, watching pro-lifers of many years just willingly throw over their scruples about an abortion-tainted vaccine. I want to be clear, the vaccines that were offered in the United States and around the world, there was no pro-life alternative. All the vaccines were developed using a kidney taken from an aborted girl named Johanna, who was aborted in the Netherlands I believe in 1967. Her kidney was taken out while she was still alive, because that's the only way you can get usable organs, is to vivisect a living fetus. They took out her kidney and they cloned it. HEK some number, but I call her Johanna because she deserves a name. And the researcher, the Dutch researcher who developed this cell line, testified under oath before the FDA, before Congress, that it was an abortion. And we know medically there's no way to get an organ unless the child is still living when it's extracted. So this was a really gruesome and horrible thing. It's as if the vaccine were made from Anne Frank's body when she was murdered in the death camp. And I said, I'm not taking this vaccine. Maybe I'll die from it because I'm overweight. I'm in the risk factor. I'd rather die than live from the fruits of an abortion. Watching the Pope and prominent pastors, including some conservative pastors whom you've spoken before, watching them all say, oh, no, there's no moral problem here. You've got to get the vaccine. It's your duty. If you love your neighbor, you'll get the vaccine. Watching that, I thought, wow, they sold out cheap. They didn't even get 30 pieces of silver. They got 3. And you know what? It turned out to be little chocolate candies wrapped in foil.
I didn't think we'd leap into to a discussion of the vaccine, but I'm glad we did, because what amazes me, John, about you, one of the reasons I admire you, is that you discover things and write about them that no one else has discovered or written about. So we're going to be talking about the Second Amendment and gun rights, but I was myself, and this is not the first time, astonished when you presented this information to me on my radio program. I thought, this is what always happens to me. I hear something like this, and then I think, why haven't I heard this before? This is very important information. This is not your opinion.
Is John just a nut? And believe me, I wish I were.
Well, you are a nut. But even though you're a nut, you're 100% right on all of these things. And when this information is presented, I think it's hard for people generally, myself included, to process it, because you say, surely I would have heard of this. This is too important for it not to have been covered. So your statement, which I just want to be clear before we move on, is that every one of the vaccines that were being pushed was tainted as being derived from an aborted human being.
Right.
Okay. So that's one level of horror.
And the fact that the churches fell all over themselves the moment Big Brother snapped his fingers. Oh, we'll close our churches. We'll get checks from the government. What could be better? We don't even have to show up on Sunday. We don't have to do anything. Like, oh, wow, the churches just want to be part of the government the way they are in Germany. They just want to have salaries from the government. They don't really want to be independent civic institutions that could potentially push back against tyranny, which, by the way, is what's happening. Gretchen Whitmer shut down her state and locked all the citizens in their homes in violation of the state constitution, as the state Supreme Court later said. She suffered no consequences. You know who did? People who the FBI lured into a fake plot to kidnap her, whom they entrapped the way they routinely entrapped Muslim Americans after 9/11. That Patriot Act, which I condemned at the time, when George W. Bush promoted it, I said, don't give George W. Bush any powers you don't want Hillary Clinton to have in 4 years. Nobody listened to me. And the Patriot Act was weaponized by Barack Obama to turn the FBI into a secret police that serves the political interests of whoever's in power.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, we're ranging widely, but the whole point...
No. It's good to range widely, but I just want to go back to the beginning. Ultimately, your book, the principal thesis of the book is that our Second Amendment rights
flow from the same vision of the human person as our First Amendment rights, and people who are willing to surrender our Second Amendment rights don't care about our First Amendment rights.
Okay.
The same churches who, when there's a mass shooting, they come out and they talk about
the epidemic of gun violence, as if it were tuberculosis or something. They don't talk about this person committed a terrible sin and murdered these people. His soul is accountable before God. Their souls have gone to God. Let's pray for the dead. Let's pray for the survivors. Let's pray for the conversion of this disgusting murderer. No, they talk about the bacillus of gun violence is spreading to every community and we must vaccinate ourselves against it. They talk as if we are not human beings with immortal souls, as if we were termites in a colony and they work for the queen. And we are all meant to follow, to like sniff around till we get the pheromone or watch the other termite bees dancing around in order that we can just operate like little robots. And nothing made them happier than to do this. The glee with which people said, oh, I got vaccinated. Oh, I'm wearing a mask. Oh, I'm staying home.
Well, okay, so there's some, I want to go back again to another thing. So how was it that this abrogation of rights and freedoms led you to write this book? In other words, as we experience these things, unprecedented in America, we had never seen these kinds of things, and I think this is why so many people, to give them a little grace, the reason they went along is because of the unprecedented nature. We had not been trained to be wary of these kinds of things. So tons of people whom we might otherwise respect and expect to do the right thing were caught unawares and went along with it. And we now see what happened.
We now see just how dangerous it is to trust the people in authority. If you hear someone is associated with an international organization, you should and you talk to such a person, you should count the fillings in your teeth afterwards and see if your credit cards are still in your wallet.
Right. Well, some people learned that in the last few years. Many didn't, but some did, because freedom is something that I always say we pretty much take for granted because we've had it. It's been challenged so little in America.
All right, but look what happened in 2020. Political riots stirred up by the Democratic Party using the pretext of George Floyd. Remember, the cops who killed George Floyd were immediately suspended, arrested, prosecuted, convicted, and imprisoned. The system worked. But the people wanted to destroy the system. The anti-American Marxists, like Barack Obama and his ghostwriter Bill Ayers, who was a Weather Underground terrorist, like Kamala Harris, who was trained by Willie Brown, the good friend of Jim Jones, the cult leader, the radical left that is anti-American, that says that the American founding itself was a conspiracy of slave owners in 1619. I call the 1619 Project the Protocols of the Elders of Jamestown, because it is every bit as unhinged a conspiracy theory as the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Both of them were political conspiracy theories cooked up by journalists and promoted in newspapers in order to demonize and target members of a different ethnic group so that the government could persecute them. Well, you remember the George Floyd riots, people hiding in their homes, leftist mobs taking control of entire neighborhoods in places like Seattle and Portland, beating up their political enemies. Store owners like Jake Gardner, a bar owner in Omaha, Nebraska, tried to defend his elderly father from a looter. He was prosecuted for allegedly committing a racial hate crime by shooting the looter who was choking him. He was driven to suicide. He was a U.S. combat hero. And after his suicide, a Democratic member of the Omaha legislature went on Twitter to gloat about his death.
You dedicate this book
to Jake Gardner. I'm in touch with his family. And when the book is printed, I'm going to take the first copy and I'm going to go to Arlington National Cemetery to Jake Gardner's grave, and I'm going to lay it on Jake Gardner's grave. And I want everyone watching this to remember Jake Gardner, to pray for him and his family. He was a victim of the American deep state, a victim of the tyranny that the left and the compliant, wussy, cowardly churches are imposing upon us one step at a time. But in 2020, you had people locked in their homes with their jobs canceled, their churches closed because of this virus. But you could have George Floyd riots, and those were fine. Those did not spread the virus because racism is a public health threat, and so by being anti-racist, they're actually healthy. But if you go to a Trump rally, that's a super spreader event. Do you remember Herman Cain, that wonderful businessman who had run for president? He went to a Trump rally, he caught COVID, he died. They mocked him on television. They laughed about it. Oh, that's what happens when you go to these super spreader events. At the same time, rioters were looting stores all across the country, and they were being described as mostly peaceful.
Can we go back to John Locke? For those who are unaware of John Locke, tell those watching, who was John Locke?
John Locke was a devout Protestant in England under the Stuarts. And the Stuarts were sort of high Anglicans, sympathetic to Catholics. And there was a civil war in England between basically the Puritans on the one side and the Anglicans and Catholics on the other. And each side persecuted the other. Nobody comes out of this with clean hands. But out of that struggle, they finally established a constitutional monarchy when they brought in William and Mary. And this is the origin of our Second Amendment and its connection to religious freedom. The text of our Second Amendment is lifted almost word for word, from the English Bill of Rights of 1690. But here's the interesting difference. In the English Bill of Rights, it says, no Protestant may be deprived of the right to have firearms. And I said, my first instinct as a Catholic was to be offended by that. And then being half Irish, I could sort of see the sense of it, but just thinking of my family. But I used to joke that everyone in America should be allowed to have a gun except Zmirak's. But since then, I've moved to Texas, and I'm now very good with an AR-15. I still won't drive a car, though. I live in Dallas, but I will not drive. I have an AR-15, but I will not drive. There are certain principles I will not compromise, and I'm going to Uber it for the rest of my life. But anyway, Protestants can't be deprived of weapons. Why would it be so weirdly specific? So then you read the history. Charles I, Charles II, James II had been disarming Puritans, had been searching their churches and taking away their weapons in order to render them helpless for a civil war or a persecution. So as a condition of accepting the throne, King William and Queen Mary had to sign this Bill of Rights, which guaranteed Protestants the right to have guns. So why were the Protestants so keen on having guns? It wasn't to defend their store of goods from Amway. It wasn't to hunt ducks. It was to protect their religious freedom. The same kind of people created the colonies in North America, most of them. And their churches were where they had militias. You would go to church, you would hear a sermon on the importance of defending your community, and then you would go out and do target practice, and you would drill in order to defend your church and your town from the Indians or the Spanish or the French. Those were the people who then defended their cities and towns from the English and overthrew that government and established the United States of America. And that's why they wrote the Second Amendment into the Constitution. Stephen Halbrook, a wonderful constitutional scholar, has got a number of books. One is called The Founder's Second Amendment. And what he shows you the debates about the Second Amendment among the founders. Nobody debated whether Americans had the right to have guns. The whole point of America was militias that would defend their freedom against tyranny. And the whole Constitution was written, it's like a Rube Goldberg, designed to make government as frustrating and difficult as possible, to make it impossible for a tyrant to take power. It's this huge, elaborate Rube Goldberg. Foreigners looked at it, especially the French, and they said, this is not efficient. How can the king do anything? That's the whole point. We don't want a Napoleon. We don't want a Robespierre.
Gridlock was the point.
Gridlock was the point. Matt Gaetz was the point. That someone like Matt Gaetz could come along and speak truth to power and try to defund the FBI from kicking down the doors of pro-lifers and infiltrating Latin Mass Catholic churches and persecuting PTA moms who don't want child porn dumped on their kids. The whole point of the Constitution was so that Matt Gaetz could bring Kevin McCarthy down and could defund Jack Smith and defund the deep state. That's why we have a United States of America. That's why we're not just a bunch of provinces like Canada. So the fact that all the founders agreed that gun rights were crucial. James Madison said, if all these checks and balances I have written into this Constitution fail, you will still have a militia of millions that would overthrow any tyrant. So the Second Amendment was
Madison said that.
He said that.
That we'd still have a militia of millions to overthrow any tyrant.
And so that the Second Amendment is the break glass in case of tyranny hanging on the wall in the founding of the United States. So isn't it interesting that the connection was between religious freedom and gun rights? That seems to suggest it comes from something profound, right?
Yeah.
That there's something basic about the human person that says he should be able to worship in the way his conscience directs him without secret police from the government coming and saying, oh, no. In this county, you have to be a Mennonite. Or in this county, you have to be a Catholic. If you want to be a Baptist, you're going to have to go down the road because that's a Baptist county. No, that's not how we're going to do things here, because we saw what a disaster it was in Europe. We saw that having state-sponsored churches produced a lot of lazy bureaucrats who didn't really care about the kingdom of God, but wanted to make sure that their check cleared. Well, isn't that what happened with the PPP loans? All our churches became government-supported churches that were dependent on checks from the government. And a lot of our churches, my own Catholic church, heavily dependent on nonprofit contracts from the federal government to resettle immigrants. I joke that the U.S. Council of Catholic Bishops is an immigration pyramid scheme and gay employment agency with a Catholic problem, because 40% of their money comes from federal resettlement money, where what they're doing is they're helping the human traffickers get people from Latin America and resettle them around America and get them on public assistance, and they're creaming off part of the money.
Okay, so we got a lot of things in the middle here. So number one is the idea that our founders realized that churches need to be part of the free market.
Right. They can't be like American automakers in the 70s that are protected by tariffs. So they create rolling couches. They get 5 miles per gallon.
Well, I don't remember those, but the
Pontiac Bonneville.
Yeah, actually, I love the Pontiac.
So do I. It's
an awesome car.
It was a rolling couch.
But that was one of the greatest cars ever. The tail fins were not that high. It was like just right.
It was my favorite.
My Uncle Joe had a Pontiac Bonneville. But the principle is that we want the government to stay out of our business. We want people to be able to be utterly free to do whatever they want.
Within respecting the inalienable rights of their neighbors and the common good.
Right.
Right. Well, we're not libertarian.
Well, exactly. God forbid. But the point is that you're saying that what fascinates me really about this idea is that we've become, even people who talk about the Second Amendment have become generally unmoored from these fundamental foundational ideas. We mention the Second Amendment, militia, whatever, but we don't draw
the connections.
We don't.
The same people who go to church on Sunday